What up, punks? Welcome back to another episode of the Pop Culture Punks podcast. I'm your host, Phil, and across from me is your boy,
Josh.
Today we will be talking about the PS4 game that came out last year, Spider-Man.
Yes, indeed.
I think the title is just Spider-Man,
Spider-Man.
So that's it, with the hyphen. Never forget the hyphen. And we'll be talking about elements of it we liked, elements of it maybe we didn't like as much, or maybe we just loved it, and kind of discussing it in the context of other games that came out that year, because last year when we had discussions about Game of the Year and stuff, I hadn't played it yet, so it was kind of in the back of my mind. I was just like, I don't know anything about it. So yeah, we'll be kind of getting into that. But before we get into that, what have you been up to this week?
So this week was a very movie heavy week for me. So originally we were going to be recording with Rip, but then we ended up rescheduling. But Gloria and I had a date night Friday, and we ended up watching A Star Is Born. And man, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but it's a fantastic movie. It is really heavy, so do not watch it if you do not want to be super sad. But I usually really do not like films that are dramas or films that tend to be more romance focused. So there was part of me that was a little hesitant with this movie.
Yeah.
It just, I knew I would enjoy it and I would find something redeemable about it for my own fulfillment. But it was fantastic. Just the cinematography, the story, the emotional payoffs. It's intense. It's an intense movie, but highly recommend. I think I saw it at Best Buy the other day for like $15 on Blu-ray, so I think it dropped a little bit, but I highly recommend watching it. But like I said, very emotional, very heavy, very deep story. But we'll be talking about that in May with Rip. So
DJ Rip.
So more on that later. I also saw Hellboy yesterday night, and I enjoyed it a ton. Like, it was interesting because I know we had talked right before going, and we looked up on Rotten Tomatoes, and it was like 15% critics and like 65,
67, something like that.
Kind of like mid-60s for Rotten Tomatoes for fan score, and I am not surprised in the slightest. I definitely am in the fan score. And even then, there's part of me that wonders if it's lower on the fan score just because of, maybe crotchety Hellboy gatekeeper fans who
absolutely
kind of
I don't get the 15%, and maybe I'm looking at the movie from the perspective of like from the this movie's going to be a 15% on Rotten Tomatoes, like I have no expectations now,
right? And
so anything is good.
So
I probably need to see it again, but I don't get it because I feel like part of it is people are comparing it too heavily, like
to the original.
Like, people can't separate Hellboy from Guillermo at this point, and so like no matter what they try and do, like they're being biased. But I can't see critics doing that. I mean, some of them maybe, but like this many critics, like 145 critics, all being incredibly biased towards Guillermo's films. It's kind of, but a lot of them do seem to be saying like this was basically a redundant film to make when you wouldn't let Guillermo do his thing. But I don't know. I think, but if anything, the fans should be more heated about it because, like, on Reddit, everybody's ticked. Like, there's like hardly any people who are positive about the film. That are, like, fans about it. Yeah,
that's surprising to me.
And I mean, it's kind of shifting. Like, there are people who are like, I had fun with it and I enjoyed it, and visually, it is very similar to like Duncan Fegredo's artwork in that run of the comic and stuff. So I don't know,
dude. Yeah, I don't get it. Like, So I went in with very low expectations for a number of reasons. One, the trailers, I think, especially the more audience-friendly trailers that they did, I think dumbed it down a lot. And having seen the film in its entirety, it's not those at all. And it's very different. I think, additionally, I am not a Hellboy fan in terms of I haven't read any of the material. I don't really have a lot of backstory. I think I saw the first two films like way back in the day, but to me, it was just kind of some red dude character, and I didn't really get it. But this movie made me want to dive head deep into everything Hellboy. So
I mean, like, I would say there's so many scenes, and I mean, every scene in this movie isn't taken from like that run of comics that you bought, because obviously they had the origin and stuff. For some reason, they decided to start the movies at Hellboy's climax when he realizes he's the descendant of Arthur and like this witch or whatever.
Right.
Which you don't know that until like 75% of the way through the comics.
Right.
So it's for some reason they decided to do that, but then they had to also add in like the intro to his character and kind of his origin, which the origin story they changed a little bit by adding Lobster Johnson, because
sure,
in the comics it's the Torch of Liberty, which actually belongs to a different creator, so they had to add Lobster. But that scene was so dope,
dude.
Like, when he just jumps in with his like janky World War II,
yeah, that was
I forget
so
what
fun.
line he said, but he just like, because in the comics, like Lobster Johnson,
when you see the devil, this'll make sure he knows who sent you. Bam! Yeah. I was like, yeah, that is so like, corny, but it was incredible.
That's absolutely like how the comics are. Like, he's always got these cheesy one-liners. He always refers to himself as like the left hand of justice, and he's like burns people's foreheads and like, that was just, like with that being like close to the beginning, I was just like hyped on it after that. I was like, dude, that was awesome.
And it was just, and I wonder if this is part of it too, is that I am not surprised in the slightest that critics didn't like it, because I think there are a lot of things that
it's messy.
It felt very messy, but I think in a weird way where it just like, it was like oddly nostalgic. Like it was oddly nostalgic of those early 2000s movies that were just kind of bananas and over the top, but it had this consistency and the quality and the fun that I never felt pulled out. Like I think of like some of the stuff narratively that happened in Venom, for example, where it just ripped me out hard, where I felt so irritated. I didn't want to be a part of it. It just was, it bothered me. Mm-hmm. Whereas with this, I feel like Venom was so much, they had to tell you everything. And like, this is what happens to this, and this is why Eddie's this. Whereas I think that was to Hellboy's benefit, is the movie just kind of chucks you in. And they're like, yeah, this is Hellboy and this is what he does, and he's just going on this adventure and either hop on the bus and ride the crazy or leave. And and I think all the low scores to me seem like the people who couldn't just like swallow their artistic pride and just have fun, because there were some moments that were really fantastic, like the horror stuff with Baba Yaga.
Dude, I couldn't sleep the past 2 nights because of that.
It was like, that was a fantastic scene. It was just so eerie. Like she had that look like there's this Soul Calibur character. Oh frick, what's his name? It's like Valdo or Val something. But he's just like this weird dude, and he does that like crawl thing like she did. And even some of the other gore, like when the giant demons come out, I was like, holy frick, like this is pretty disturbing. But it just was like, this is just the world that they're in. Like, there's just wild, crazy monsters that just come out of the streets and do this stuff. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, the 4 gatekeeper demons. And I mean, I'm just spitballing, but it wasn't like the 4 gatekeeper demons are out here and they're stepping on people. It was just like, no, this is just what's happening, and you roll with it. So it was cheesy, it was chaotic, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think the big reason that isn't like the Guillermo thing that people their gripes are about it are that there's just too much. Like there's too much, especially if you have a knowledge about the comics. Like they tried to do way too much stuff in one movie.
I could see that
they should have done in like a series of films.
Sure.
Like they should have toned this down a lot more. And because like the Hellboy comics are not this violent by any means. And they're not, like, Hellboy is not a petulant child, like, in the comics. He's more of, like, a brooding detective type who's actually pretty smart. And he's not like, dude, homework, I don't like homework. So, like, I think people are kind of mad about that characterization. But that's how the Guillermo Hellboy is, too. He's, like, a man-child and, like, doesn't listen to his dad. And, it's, like, so, I don't know. I think it's just, it's trying to appeal to a different audience,
right,
in a way, so.
Well, and I think that was the fun of it, is he never came across, I mean, like I said, I could totally see someone who has a lot of knowledge of the source material maybe being more critical, because there might be things that don't jive with who Hellboy is in their minds, and I don't have that picture in my brain. And so for me watching it, I never saw him as stupid. I saw him as very kind of irresponsible and just kind of like, what? I don't want to do this. If I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it. And so then, but then there's these witty banter moments where he's just the quickest person in the room, or when he fights these trolls or whatever, and it's like you can tell that he's a formidable fighter and he like knows what he's doing, and that was a lot of fun. Like
when he picks up that giant sword, and just goes ham on that dude.
It was so much fun. Like I want to go see it again. And again, it doesn't need to be a 10 out of 10 film for me to want to see it, but it just was. It was hilarious. It was gory. It just was a very fun movie. It was like one of the first times in movies recently where I felt like This was, and I mean, I feel like some people had that with, Venom or some of the other recent films, but it just was like, it was a blast. It was just a good time, but I
don't get it. I would say it's at least on the same level as Venom, if not higher.
I would say it's way higher than
And I think
Venom,
the audience is driving with that, but for some reason, critics aren't.
I'm not surprised. Like, I think the CGI in a handful of scenes was really, really subpar. But then
I think they could have done better on Hellboy too.
But here's the thing to me, though, that almost kind of clicked is it felt like it was almost purposeful, because there's other scenes where the CGI is incredible, or it's like they did practical effects and it just looks haunting and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But it seemed like the scenes that they did more that cartoony, like poorly done CGI, it almost had like a music video, like a metal music video feel. And so I wonder if that was like an aesthetic choice more than a like our budget isn't big enough to do something crazy.
So there was an article that came out that basically, because Neil Marshall didn't even go to the premiere.
Really?
Apparently he like stormed off set on the last day of like when the producers showed him like the final cut, and he didn't even go to the premiere.
Neil Marshall, he's the
director.
Okay.
And I think he didn't like the final product. And I think I think there was a lot of internal strife between him and the producers and
interesting,
the screenwriters and stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't think he got what he wanted.
Well,
and I'm curious to see if like what he wanted would have been like more clear cut and less jumbled. Because I like the movie is fun, and I definitely think it deserves a 6 out of 10 maybe.
Yeah.
But there are definitely things in it I can see why people like are mad about it or like don't think it's as good as the Guillermo ones.
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
Even though the Guillermo ones have their own things where they, for some reason, Hellboy and Liz get together and have a kid, which never happens in the comics at all. Like he has these weird things where he mischaracterizes people and stuff too, but those ones, the world felt more like mystical and magical rather than like violent.
Yeah.
And I feel like the Hellboy comics is somewhere in between those two.
Sure.
Like it's very fantasy with like a Lovecraftian horror aesthetic.
Sure.
So this one kind of went the other direction and just went straight up like gruesome and horror.
Yeah.
And, but I think Hellboy's characterization in a lot of moments still, like in the comics, he's kind of like a more of a weather-worn detective type. And so like whenever he has to fight a beast, he's just like, oh, not again. And like he just takes him out.
Yeah.
Like it's easy basically, but he also gets tossed around. And like the scene with the giants reminded me a lot of like the comic scenes where he's just like pounding on giants, but then they're also like tossing him around and he's just like, ah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's a lot of moments where I was like just grinning because I was like, like this reminds me so much of the comics.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
Yeah.
But then there are other moments where I'm like, I don't know what I should feel right now.
Yeah, and so that's why I'm not really surprised at the split. I think if you are looking to have fun and you're willing to find the fun in the movie, you're gonna have a blast. I think if you have a very critical perspective, usually with films, you're not gonna like it. So that's pretty much the gist. But that's it. And I threw also on the list. I've actually been watching it for probably a couple months now, but I never shout it out because I haven't been close to the end, but I've been watching the Adult Swim show Venture Bros, and it's hard to recommend because it's very crass and like to an extreme level. Like I think it even can put like Archer to shame in something.
Isn't Archer kind of inspired by that kind of stuff?
I am sure. The whole show is just kind of a giant riff on the old kind of like
Johnny
60s, 70s Johnny Quest kind of shows. And it does a fantastic job of just playing with like the whole spy espionage things and just like making it so ridiculous, but somehow weaving these coherent storylines in it. And it just kind of plays with the whole old vision of how the heroes and villains were. And so there's like this organization called like the something of calamitous, like the villains of calamitous intent, and it's like this organization. So there's like different episodes where a villain will show up where they're not supposed to be, and they're like, hey, like you can't arch to, like it's called like arching, it's like you can't arch today, and they're like, well, actually according to like, you know, propaganda thing of this subsection C, like if we do this, and they're like, oh my gosh, fine. And so they just play with all this stuff that's really funny, but in the midst of that is a lot of pretty like pretty vulgar humor and jokes and things like that. But
it's Adult Swim, right?
It's Adult Swim, so that shouldn't be surprising.
Yeah.
So it's really freaking funny, but it's very freaking crass at the same time. So it's take it with a grain of salt if you're interested in checking it out. So
Nice.
yeah.
Other than seeing Hellboy, which I also saw Friday, I started reading the Game of Thrones books.
Nice.
I'm like 50 pages in, and it's really good so far. I'm surprised how close the show is to the books so far. So I don't have much else to say because Game of Thrones has been around for a while, but it's also very early. I started reading the Sandman series again, which is a comic by Neil Gaiman.
Right on.
For some reason, when the first time when I tried to read through it, I got bored with it. I don't know. And it's like a really highly regarded series, like hailed as one of the more literary comic series, but for some reason it didn't click, and I think it's clicking a lot more this time.
Sure.
I don't know why, but it's pretty interesting so far. Basically, there was like a superhero, I don't remember when, like the 60s or 70s, called the Sandman, but he was like a cheesy like golden age type superhero.
Yeah.
And I think when Vertigo or DC approached Neil Gaiman, they basically asked him to like reinvent him, and so he's like this more like goth type character that's like God. He's basically a god. They call him the Endless, and there's like Dream, which is him, and then Death, Desire, like this whole swath of that's all D words for some reason, and they're basically gods, like eternal beings, and he's one of them. He's like the Sandman. He can put people to sleep, give them nightmares and dreams and stuff, and it's basically him. The first issue is basically him trying to like get his artifacts back and like regain power because this like cult like captured him for 100 years or something like that. So it's pretty interesting. It's got a lot of like mystical and like weird magic-y stuff in it. It's like visually kind of cool, but the art is also a little bit dated in my opinion, but that might be blasphemous.
When did it come out? When did it come out?
I think it was the 80s.
Okay,
so like that boom of
I could see. Yeah, sure.
So
sweet.
It's pretty good. And then lastly, Atlanta,
buddy,
which we kind of talked about before this, but I would highly recommend it, with the caveat that if you don't like being made uncomfortable by TV shows.
Well, especially something that can be very, I think especially like the racial element of
more like
the commentary that goes on. There's some pretty uncomfortable scenes that it's like, it's pretty, but it's fantastic.
I haven't laughed this hard at watching a TV show in a long time. Like there's some scenes in there that are just so funny and so poignant, but also like other scenes where you're just like, man, like if this really happens, like I kind of get it now. Like, and it plays the balance between like surrealness and like sitcom funny situations and like balance, like real life type stuff. So it's
almost like a surrealist comedy drama, because there's this weird balance of like these weird things. Like even one of the other surreal things that happens is on the bus when Ern has Lainey, it's Lainey, right, as his daughter, Lottie, and there's like the Nutella man, and he's like, eat that effing sandwich, and he's like, what? And then he turns and he's gone, and you're like, was that a dream? Like, is that guy there? It's just, and
then he actually shows up later in the commercial. He's like, I forget what his name is, like Ahmed something. Like,
and he like sells like some
weird religion.
Yeah,
thing. He's
exactly.
Like, come to me for all your answers, and it's like very monotone and like just deadpan.
And you can just tell Ern is like, what is that guy? Like, I saw that guy on the bus. He's trying to give me a Nutella sandwich.
Yep. So,
but
it's a great show.
It's incredible.
I've already finished the first season, so. And I started it like 2 nights ago.
It's really easy to binge.
I couldn't fall asleep on Friday because of Baba Yaga, so
Baba Yaga,
I ended up watching
Eat Your Eyes
Atlanta until like 1 a.m. So
nice. Yeah, dude. Season 2 somehow is even better than season 1. I literally don't know how they did it, but there are just some incredible episodes
with the alligator.
Yeah, the alligator man. Have you already watched that one? He's like, he doesn't really have an alligator. Yes, he does. It's like,
oh gosh.
Oh, I need to watch that show again. That show is just so freaking good.
It's so funny.
And then just the last, is it the last episode of the season is the talk show, or is that the second to last?
I think it's the second to last.
That is probably one of the funniest, most poignant episodes of anything I've ever seen. That's him, officer. It's like, I called them. It's so good.
Oh, so yeah. That's mainly what I've been up to this week.
Right on.
Not a whole lot. So, Spider-Man PS4. So,
yeah, dude.
Like I said in the beginning, I didn't play this game last year, and I'll be honest, I was kind of like not excited about it for some reason. in a sense. And
Shame on
I've
you.
never played the Arkham games really. I think I've played half of the first one, and I've never really been into like superhero games for some reason. Even though I love superheroes, it just like it feels like in my mind it's like the story. The story is just the story that I probably already know in a sense, just because of other things.
Right.
So I don't like usually I play games because of the story, and so I've never been interested. I got the game for Christmas, and I finally decided to play it because of the podcast. And holy cow, I think like between this game and the Into the Spider-Verse movie, I've like gained a new appreciation for Spider-Man as a character.
Buddy.
Because like before that movie and before this game, like Spider-Man was probably one of my least favorite superheroes for some reason. Like he was just uninteresting to me.
Sure.
And I think after watching that movie and after like especially after playing this game, like he's definitely up there for me now. Like,
yeah,
it's super good.
So what about? I know this is like I feel like a big question, but so like, what about who he was as a hero was different in these two representations that kind of maybe clicked or made him more interesting?
I mean, my only actual understanding of who Spider-Man and Peter Parker are is the movies, because I've read some of the comics, but not really. So in the movies, like he's an interesting character, but at the same time, it's just kind of like I didn't feel like I cared, and maybe it's because I like the more like brooding type superheroes, like Batman is one of my favorites, or like Daredevil, like characters who are conflicted.
It's a little more dark,
like conflicted in a more like dark sense, rather than conflicted about like I needed to like responsibilities versus like good versus evil sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So, and it's the same reason I don't like a lot of superheroes, because it's just like, I don't know, like there's not that like dark element to it. And I think that's basically the reason. And I wouldn't say the game gave me the sense like, oh, Spider-Man's dark now. It was more of like, I think the game helped flesh out the character more, and to see like why it's important, why his values are important. And especially a lot of moments in the game, like basically forced him to make choices based on his values, like whether or not he chooses this or this, and you're kind of like, man, I don't think I could make that choice. And it kind of clicked to see like, oh, this is just basically like I don't know how old he is in the game. I think he's like college age.
Yeah, he's like late
20s,
early
20s,
30s,
something like that. So I think, and maybe it's because he's a little bit older that I was able to click with him, because I think in the comics traditionally he's been like high school age.
Right.
But yeah, I think something about the game and the movie kind of like fleshed out his character more and showed me. And I mean, obviously in the movie there's no Peter Parker, it's Miles, but I think they have the same sort of conflict with like not feeling like they're actually capable of being the hero that they need to be in every moment. So
do you think it's how both of these retellings of Spider-Man almost grappled with, because I feel like one of the things that sometimes superhero movies and content struggles with is they don't grasp with the realism that they're two decisions from being a villain or something, or they're two decisions from like killing a whole bunch of people on accident or on purpose.
Yeah.
And I felt like these more recent retellings actually delved into, like, it wasn't just like, oh, I'm the good guy and so therefore I make good decisions. It was actually, no, these are my values, and now I'm being confronted with having to make a hard decision on whether or not my values are going to stand, because this person that's making the choice that I don't agree with is a loved one or someone I care about. You know, like, what do I do with that? Or it's someone I respect, or like all of a sudden the things start conflicting with themselves, and someone who's like set in stone in their moral compass has to kind of not reassess, but live by what they say regardless of who the person is.
Yeah, and I think the game has the benefit of having more time.
Yeah,
because
that's true.
In the game you can both do like the story itself, which would basically be the movie, or a very extended movie, or you can like do the side stuff, and you can actually like swing around New York and like go save people and stop crime and fight hordes of bad guys in buildings and like collect stuff, and kind of like all these things that like you'd expect Spider-Man to do when he's not like fighting like a city destroying force of people.
Right.
So like you kind of get the time to breathe between the story beats and like be Spider-Man for a while. That isn't like trying to save the entire world or trying to save the entire city of New York. Like he's just on the streets like being Spider-Man and making choices and like doing good things kind of.
Yeah.
And I think because the game allowed me to do that as the character in a sense, it made me have a better appreciation for the balance that Spider-Man has to deal with in like that context. So I think in the movies, like in like the Raimi movies, you kind of get that when he first becomes Spider-Man. You see some scenes where he's like fighting crime and doing all that stuff, but like obviously in a movie eventually like you have to get the character moving towards the climax of the story. Like
right.
In a game you have the benefit of it being a game. Like you can like if I don't want to do the story, I don't have to do the story. I can just run around New York,
get backpacks
and be Spider-Man and collect everything and do
right.
all the research tasks, and like the game continues on. It's in like movies you can't do that because people get bored. Like nobody wants to dwell on this stuff for too long. Like it makes the story uninteresting. So
yeah,
I think because of that, it allowed me to get that appreciation for it.
Sure.
And the Miles movie was just so well done and so well written. I think I just couldn't help but be inspired by it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for sure.
So
cool. Well, I know one of the things that was really interesting, and I had watched it, I think, after I'd just beaten it, but Danny O'Dwyer, who does the No Clip YouTube channel and does a bunch of really high-quality video game documentaries about like devs and stuff, he did a review of it, and he equated this Spider-Man game to the same sensation he had playing a Tony Hawk game back in the day, which I thought was a really insightful comparison. And I don't relate to it per se in that I didn't spend a lot of time playing the Tony Hawk games, but I thought it was interesting in that a lot of the things that you have to do, and what he put forward was that a lot of the things you have to do are very basic and very simple and very easy. It's, go get this pigeon, fight this guy, hold this car, keep it from running into traffic, rescue this person who's here, like find a backpack. It's just very easy, quick things, but you get rewarded for doing them. Or there's like a fun thing where, I don't know how many times when it was like, all right, well, I'm going to activate all the towers so I can see all the achievement things right away. And so then I did that and I'm like, oh, there's like 4 backpacks by me. And then it's like, oh, you
get one
the next
backpack
4
and
like
you're
right
like, that
there.
one's pretty close. I'll just go get that one too. And then 10 backpacks later, you're like, dang it.
You're like, you know what? I only have 20 more to go. I'm just gonna
get them all.
Like it'll take me like 10 minutes. And then in the midst of doing that, you get better at, the versatility and being able to actually fly around and the actual traversal and everything that goes into getting around the city faster. You get better at it because it is mechanical. Like it's not just an automatic, you can get better at the timing and running and jumping off of buildings and launching yourself into stuff. And like, it just feels so fast, but there's a reward to doing the simple, mundane things.
I would say like, that's almost one of the best parts about the game is how smooth it feels when you're traveling.
Yeah.
Like, I think Spider-Man's one of the hardest characters to make a game for because of the way he travels through the city. Like, just making it feel like you're actually swinging. I don't think any Spider-Man games really have been able to capture that in the way that this game has done it.
There was one that I think was close, and I can't remember if it was Spider-Man 2.
I think Spider-Man 2.
It was one of the ones based on the Raimi films.
Yeah.
But I know
which
that
people
that
herald as like the next best Spider-Man game.
Interestingly enough, that was made by Neversoft, who made all the Tony Hawk games. So it was interesting that they kind of had this grasp on motion and making. If you're doing the same thing over and over, it should not feel necessarily new, but you should feel like you're getting better at it. And so
it feels smooth and like you
absolutely
kind of fit into a groove eventually.
Yep.
Which this game, that's an interesting comparison because growing up, I only played Tony Hawk games basically.
Right.
Other than like Dragon Ball Z and stuff.
Sure.
But like thinking about it like that makes a lot more sense because those games captured the essence of skateboarding so well in a sense, and like a lot of the stuff you were doing was easy in a sense, other than like digging deeper and getting into the tricks, like collecting stuff or doing like the skate challenges where you had to collect the letters and meet different people and like do their challenges and stuff. Like it's all very like simple stuff, but in the way that they tied it into like the world itself, like the skating world or whatever you want to call it, it kind of like everything felt fluid. And that's kind of how this game felt too. Like it didn't, unless you think about it too much, it didn't feel like a collectathon. Which is what, which is kind of why I was apprehensive of it. I was like, I'm sure it'll have a good story, but then it's just going to be a collectathon afterwards. And I'm not interested in that kind of stuff in a sense, but playing it didn't, if it did feel like that, I enjoyed it somehow. Yeah. Which I don't really like collectathons in a sense, but I think the way that they they integrated it into the Peter Parker Spider-Man narrative. Like the research tasks made sense in the context of the story, and like collecting the backpacks was just a fun thing to do on the side. Like you're swinging to your next mission and you see a backpack right over, you're like, oh, I'm gonna go find this. And sometimes they're a little hard to find, and you kind of gotta like climb around the building a little bit. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, and that's an interesting point as well, in that I really don't enjoy collectathons. I've tried playing like ukulele, and it's one of those games I pick up on and off just because it's like, yeah, it's fun. You kind of run around for a little bit, and then you get a couple pages, and then you're done. But it's not something I want to sink my teeth into, and I think because it feels like I'm not really doing it for anything. I'm just getting more stuff to progress further in the story.
Like the point of the game is collecting
just
stuff,
getting
basically,
stuff.
yeah.
And I feel like what was fun about Spider-Man, and I think it really needs to be heralded and acknowledged, is if any game would have gotten microtransactions, it would have been this game. In that, pay $5 for a suit pack, or loot boxes for, like if you don't, you can either get a new suit or you get a bunch of items to like build new tech and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was never any of that. Like the entire game was, and I think that's what got me. That to me was the whole fun part, is they created the game to have, I don't know what the total number of suits was, but it was a lot. It was probably upwards of like 30 maybe total.
I think there was like 30, 40.
And then I know in the DLC they added like 3 or 4 per expansion. And I think that was some of the most fun I had, is I want to see what suits they added. Like, what suits did they put in the game? Like, what ones? It's like, oh my gosh, they have the 2049 suit. Or like, oh, dude, they've got the Raimi Spider-Man suit that they added. Or like, there was just this, but to get it, you have to play the game and you have to collect the stuff. So the collecting never felt like I'm just doing it to do it. It was like, well, there is a reward. Like, well, then I get better gear that I can do in fighting.
And the way that you upgrade your gadgets and your stats and you buy suits and all of that stuff is tied to like those tokens and like you're right. It very easily could have been like buy this.
It could have been exploited very easily.
But I think the way that they implemented it was really well done, because
definitely
there were so many times where I would be like, oh, like I have almost enough to get like the classic Spider-Man suit. I need like these 2 more challenge tokens. Like I'm gonna go do this challenge quick and get it done, and then then you can upgrade your stuff. And it was like a fun integration of the collecting stuff. Had a purpose in like being able to upgrade stuff.
Yeah. Do you think, and granted, so hearing that you haven't played a ton of the Arkham games, so I think I've only I played like maybe 5 hours of Arkham Knight, and I beat Arkham City in its entirety. But with superhero games, and I feel like with games in general, what do you think about the fact that they actually let you be strong in this game? Like, it felt like you actually were a formidable fighter throughout, versus I'm trying to think of like other games where they almost like withhold that from you, of like giving you the ability, and some of it is narrative reasons and it actually like helps. I think of other games, for example, like a Dark Souls or a Bloodborne, where you just actually have to get good, and then you're toasting everything. But
I don't know. I mean, I played it on easy, not like the dumb easy mode, like basically the photograph mode or whatever. I played it on like the second one, just because I wanted to get through it.
Yeah.
But I think, other than the swinging, my second favorite part about the game itself, not talking about story and stuff like that,
right,
is like the combat. I think the combat felt so fluid and so seamless that like I actually sought out like those like towers where you like battle like hundreds of enemies to like capture it, even though it wastes like a half an hour to an hour of your time. Like I actually, like, every time I saw one, I'm like, oh dude, let's go, because like it was just so fun, like pressing like triangle to grab the enemy, then you pull him towards you and you hit him, and then you kick him into the sky and you punch him to the ground, and then you swing, like you like grab another guy with your web, and you like, it was like very fluid like momentum, trying to get like combos and like just going back and forth and like grabbing something with the bumpers and like just swinging it around and hitting people, and like all the upgrades you could get with like how you then you could start grabbing people and like the big brutes and like chucking them around. Like it just felt so rewarding and so fluid. And I think because of where they placed the game, where like you've already been Spider-Man for a while, like you're already like basically comfortable with this, and like, so I think it was a smart move making it so you were already like powerful and strong.
Sure.
And I think it was less about like how hard you were hitting and more about how well you were like fighting. Yeah. Because if anything, Spider-Man's got the strength, but it's more about like the agility and being able to like navigate like
definitely,
because most of the combat scenarios you get in, like you're surrounded by like 10 or 20 dudes, and like in a normal situation, like even Batman, it's like, how does Batman get out of that? But it's just, it was super fun being able to like figure out how to get out of these situations. And some of them got really tough, even on easy. I was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
But I would just like go gung-ho and just start going nuts. So,
well, and I mean, hearkening to the Arkham games, because I feel like those are the only games that are actually, you could even slightly compare to this one.
I mean, it's very similar.
But but even then, I think it's hard because you're playing as Batman, who is a very heavy, slow, methodical hero. And so it makes sense that, when I think of like Arkham City, it's a lot of, punching this guy in stealth, flying up to the rafters and doing all this stuff. Whereas when I was playing Spider-Man, I did try to stealth some of the places because it was fun and you could just do it so quick because you're zipping here and you're going here and you're going and you're just like flying around. But there was part of me that like I don't look back on the Batman games very fondly, I think, because it just felt so slow. And there were parts that felt almost cheap, because they had the machine gun enemies in that game too, but you had batarangs and stuff, but like I almost never used any of the gadget because it was so clunky to like pull up a quick selection thing, do this and then this and press this button. Whereas in Spider-Man, it's like, oh, there's a machine gun guy over there. Well, if I just like dodge, and because of the quick dodge, I'm going to quick dodge, fly over here, snap that guy first, chuck him, and it's like I'm going to sticky him with one of those web grenades, and I'm going to throw him over here, and it just was like, just so snappy. Like
and
I
think I mean, it kind of makes sense because Batman is supposed to be more of a stealth character in a sense.
Absolutely.
So it makes sense that the games would be slower and more methodical. But in this game, I think there was a lot of moments where I used stealth, but I usually use it for like the first round of like the onslaught, and then once you get rid of all the guys, like they're gonna see you because you just took out like
the entire
30 of them by stealth.
Right.
And that was fun, but I think it was more fun if you didn't play it stealthily. You just like went in there and like just figured out how to like take down 20 enemies and you're surrounded, and like you be like figuring out how to use all of like the web gadgets, and like I would be like, okay, first I'm gonna use the web grenades, and once I run out of the web grenades, then I'm gonna turn on this web gadget, and I'm gonna use that, and then I'm gonna knock out these 3 dudes with like a swing, and I'm gonna grab their guns with my like. It was more like in the moment, like tactical, and trying to like think about fighting scenarios and stuff, and it was super fluid and super fun.
Definitely.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, I mean, I feel like we're not necessarily doing a review or a deep dive into like mechanics, but what hit you with the story? Because I remember getting a couple texts when you were playing that it seemed that it was resonating more than maybe other, basically the Raimi movies and the Andrew Garfield version, or other stuff. So like why do you think the story actually was more quality in this one versus maybe other and I feel like in general, even like other superhero retellings? Yeah,
I think the first part is I don't think they were afraid to be what it was. I think like the fact that they had like all of the villains in it, and like they leaned into the superhero stuff pretty heavily, I think helped the story. But I think on the flip side of that, they didn't rely on that being like the main narrative thrust, is like, oh, Spider-Man beats this bad guy, and then he goes back to the city, and then he beats this guy. It was kind of like the reason all of the bad guys were there was tied into the narrative, and it just felt cohesive in a sense. And I think the weight behind what was happening in the game made sense because like Peter knew these people, and like he trusted them, and like you said at the beginning, like he trusted these people, and they were like evil basically. So
what did you think? So now we're kind of diving into spoiler territory, but what did you think of the reveal with so spoilers at about 40 minutes, we'll say 39, at 39 minutes, spoilers. What did you think of the reveal with Doc Ock and is it Mr. What was the name of the guy who ran the homeless shelter? I can't remember his full name.
Yeah, what was his name?
But what did you think of that whole reveal? And I kind of saw the setup coming with...
Which reveal are you referring to?
I guess there's a couple. So
yeah, there's a lot of reveals.
There's a lot of reveals. So I think mainly first that... because I feel like the big catalyst moment was...
Mr. Negative, Martin Lee.
That Martin Lee was he was Mr. Negative, and he was the one kind of orchestrating all this stuff. That one I felt was kind of alluded to and set up.
I wasn't surprised by that.
Same.
But I think you weren't supposed to be in a sense.
Right.
Like it was kind of like you knew Peter was surprised by it. In that way you were surprised, but you also, I think they had enough narrative foreshadowing that you like knew something was off about him and that he was like, something was weird. But you didn't know why. And you didn't know why he kept referring to like a bad version of himself. You're like, what are you talking about? Like
you run a homeless
part
shelter.
Part of you good and
like,
part of you's bad. And then once you find out who he is, you're like, oh, like there's actually like this evil force that's like taking over this guy, kind of.
For sure.
So
definitely.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I was surprised by that. And I think the Doc Ock thing, I really enjoyed how they did his storyline. I think because they made him extremely sympathetic, but also once he became bad, it gave it a lot more weight to like his evilness, because he just like went full on like evil once he did. But like they grounded it in reality in that like the suit was corrupting his brain basically. But he did it because his legs were shot. Like he had the disease or whatever. And like it was kind of that desperation that drove him to a life of crime basically, in a sense. And I think Peter being tied to him as being like his research partner, like I think that added a lot more weight to the story and stuff. And I think Peter was like coincidentally tied to two of the main bad guys very closely, like being like Aunt May works for Martin Lee basically and like takes over his job, and then working beside Doc Ock. But yeah, the Doc Ock thing I knew was coming at some point, but I was very curious to see how they played it out. And I think again with that one, it wasn't a surprise when it happened. It was more of like I saw like little, as they like did the little interactions between him and Peter, it was like slowly you saw like the breakdown basically of a man, and like all of a sudden you get to the point where you're like, oh, like the next time we see Doc Ock, he's gonna be like the bad guy. Like you could kind of like see his progression downward as like a man in desperation trying to like figure out a way to like heal his limbs and stuff, and he finally gets it, and then Peter helps him fix it actually, and then he like uses it for evil and stuff. So I think it was like one of the better like villain origin stories I've seen, for sure, in a way that was like very impactful and like meaningful.
Definitely. Yeah. And I wonder too if part of the fun of seeing the story play out was like one of my favorite fights in the whole game is at the end when you fight Dr. Octavius on the top of the roof. And just the like specifically because it happens in multiple points in the game, but just seeing the banter between the characters as you're fighting, I think that was one of the things that made this game feel amazing, that was super subtle and not very out there, is there aren't a lot of moments where stuff is repeated in terms of like dialogue or responses and things like that. Like it's always Peter doesn't banter with Scorpion the same way that he does Mr. Negative or with your generic ruffian, on the rooftop, or the way he does with Dr. Octavius when they're fighting and he's zipping around and he's, yelling at him for being this like father figure for him. And you're like, what I've lost. And yet here you are doing this, like, how dare you? And it's just, there's like emotion even in the midst of zipping through and like
even
ducking.
On a deeper level, like most of the time, like Peter knows who they are, but he doesn't know that they know who he is. Or at least with Doc Ock, like he doesn't know who Doc Ock, or he doesn't know Doc Ock knows that he's Peter until like he defeats him basically. Yeah. And so like that dialogue is all like Peter has to navigate this thing of like, I need to tell this person that I looked up to and like basically worshipped for like the past how many ever years and like revered him for his scientific knowledge and rational thought, and now he's nuts. Like I need to figure out how to talk to this dude while he's like trying to beat the snot out of me and kill me. Like, and like the dialogue is very subtle. And I think in a lot of other games, you don't get even dialogue in like boss battles, like, cause those are boss battles. Like, but in a sense, like they feel so fluid and integrated into the narrative of the story. You don't even like think of them as like, oh, okay, now I'm entering the boss battle stage and then I'm going to go back to the narrative stage afterwards. It's kind of like the narrative never stops amidst the boss battle, and you get all of the dialogue and stuff like that, and it felt really seamless.
Yeah, definitely.
And even in smaller moments, like when you're just swinging to other things, like his calls between him and the cop or him and Mary Jane, and like very subtle like moments that hint at relationships or hint at like what is Peter's relationship to this cop and how do they know each other and have they been working together, and you kind of get that a little bit through like as they continue to talk and as they banter with each other, and he constantly says like Spider Cop,
yeah.
Or like him talking to Mary Jane and you're trying to figure out like were they together and now they broke up, like what happened with them, and like it felt very organic in the way that they introduced a lot of that stuff
For sure.
and in a cool way that was like, oh, this is how Spider-Man would interact with the world in a sense. Like he's just, and it's kind of funny because like sometimes I'd be like just jumping out of like a battle of me just like netting up 30 bad guys, and then boop, Ant-Man, he's just like off swinging again, having a nice conversation with his aunt, like swinging through New York, and like I'm like, how does he do this so calmly? But
and I think that was one of the cool things of seeing his character, and to your point that he isn't necessarily always wrestling with this, I don't know, this existential crisis as a superhero. A lot of Peter Parker, I feel like his struggles is balancing life, which is oddly relatable, but I think because of the context, it can be kind of muddled in that message. But in a weird way, this game is all about that. It's like the whole game is a giant metaphor for time management.
Yep.
But like you're like going to get backpacks, and then here's Aunt May calling because you got to go over to the homeless shelter and help with this, and like Mary Jane needs you right now, and it's just like there's a weird feeling of exhaustion that's kind of put forward, and I can't remember.
Yeah, you're like, man, this dude doesn't get time to rest.
When I think there's parts towards the end where he says that, where he's like, I just need to sleep, and he's just like going, and I'm just like, man, like this is. But they grapple with that, and they actually give these moments where you're like, I've been wondering, like, do you sleep at all? And but the fact that they have just a few subtle moments where he calls out like, I'm tired, like I'm exhausted. You're like, man, like. That's kind of a very interesting sub thing to reference in the midst of this, of like, it would have been really easy to just shrug off that, no, it's a video game. Peter Parker just has infinite energy to do these things. But in the midst of it, there's this nod to the fact that, no, he's still human and he still needs to go to bed. But that's aside from it. But what did you think of the ending with Aunt May and that whole dialogue at the end?
I'm trying to remember what the dialogue was.
I don't remember anything specifically, but more just because I believe, to your point, that she also knew the whole time is kind of her,
or she suspected, she was kind of
said.
like she didn't officially know, but she like suspected it was him or something.
Yeah, she's like, you were always running off at weird times, and like you just never were around, and
I liked that whole scene. I think that was one of the times I texted you, actually, was that scene and the scene where Miles' dad gets
is killed
or whatever, and that whole sequence. I was like, oh gosh. I liked the sequence, and I think that moral implications of that choice he had to make is like, in that moment I was like, dang, I don't know, like how would you make this decision? Like you can save your aunt by using the antidote, or you can not use the antidote and let her die and save the rest of the city. And in a sense, that's like kind of Spider-Man's like MO, basically. Like, do I care about the city more than I care about the people, or my people, or do I care about my family and my friends more than I care about saving the city? And it's kind of like he has to always choose the city because of that responsibility that he has for the powers that he has. And like, I think that moment was like the final synthesis of like, frick, like this has like very deep implications as far as like philosophical like underpinnings kind of. And I really liked it. I don't know about Aunt May knowing about who he was. I don't know, but
no, that's a good point. I think, I don't know, as I think about it, I feel like there was a tinge of darkness to this game in that, but it wasn't in your face. Like when you think of the shadow guys and whatever, like they like straight up shoot people in that scene, and there's like this explosion that Martin Lee has go off at the big event for, I think it's Osborn or for somebody. And there is a seriousness too, even with like Aunt May dying, and it could have been really easy for them to write out in that, to like write it in a way where it's like, oh, and Peter saves Aunt May because like we know she's really important. But I was kind of surprised that they did not pull that punch, because that would have been really easy to get out of, I feel like, and to get both ends, but they didn't,
Mm-hmm.
and they made Peter have to to your point, like willingly choose that this is, like, no, I need to do the greater thing.
Yeah, it was kind
of
of
just
like
saving.
I referenced this last time, I think, but it was kind of that moment in the hero's journey where like he gets what he wants, but it comes with a cost.
Yep.
And the cost is like sacrificing his aunt's life for like
the greater good. Definitely.
Kind of. For
sure.
So it's like, oh man, I think I teared up at that scene.
I did,
I
dude.
like,
I did too. I was
gosh.
choking up. I was like, man, Aunt May.
No, it's kind of cliche at this point because a lot of people have said it, but like the game truly does make you feel like you are Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Like the way that it seamlessly integrates everything.
Definitely.
Like you feel like you're Spider-Man and you're making choices that Spider-Man would have to make, and granted you don't really have a choice actually in the game, but the way the game works makes it feel like you're making those choices. And
right.
You're actually like being him.
Definitely.
So
nice. Any other general thoughts? Otherwise, I thought maybe just like a closing thought would be.
I would say, since we haven't said anything negative, my least favorite parts about the game were any parts where I wasn't Spider-Man. I hated the Mary Jane parts,
and the Miles Morales,
and I hated the Miles parts.
Yeah,
and not because I didn't like the characters. I actually really liked their characterization in the games, but it just felt so unnecessary.
Yeah,
like it just felt like shoehorned in stealth missions. I was like, if anything broke the flow of the game, it was those scenes where it was agree. Like, this is unnecessary in a sense.
Yeah,
and I think they could have done it differently. To still get the effect that they were trying to go for, because I think I think they wanted to give Peter Parker time to like chill in the story, which I think that makes sense. But I think the way that they did it just felt weird and unnecessary. Like, I don't need to be doing this. Like, there's no reason.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, and I think it's weird because I don't really get what the point was to add those in, even if it was to kind of take a respite from Peter Parker's character. I don't get why you would put us then in control of two of the most unmobile people that are the antithesis of what we've been experiencing the entire game. Like it wasn't like, oh, Mary Jane, like I have to protect, because that was one that I thought was really interesting, is the that actually would have been amazing if they would have done more stuff like this, was when Mary Jane's at the museum and you actually have to go and you're like talking with her to be like, okay, go. And then you like zip in and like grab this guy and like do
that
this.
One
and
felt
then you
more integrated because it's like
you still get to be Spider-Man,
but through somebody else's eyes. Like Mary Jane, like because of the situation, Spider-Man can't really like just jump in. Right. He needs Mary Jane on the ground to help him stealthily take out these dudes. And in that sense, I was like, okay, this makes sense.
Right.
But most of them, it was just like, I see what you're trying to do story-wise. Like, a lot of the Miles scenes, they were trying to, like, characterize him and, like, give him a part of the story. Mm-hmm. But I think you could have just done that in a cutscene or something.
Yeah.
If
no, that's a good
Or
point.
it wasn't even necessary because, like, Miles really wasn't, like, that important to his story in a sense. And I mean, obviously, they're alluding to
stuff,
like the next game, so I think they were trying to characterize all the people. Yep. But I don't think it needed to be a gameplay aspect.
No, I agree.
So I think that was probably my least favorite and the one thing that really took me out of it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there was really anything else that I didn't like. I do remember distinctly being kind of frustrated with those parts, just because it felt, like the reason I'm playing this game is not to stealth hide behind cabinets. Like I want to throw
chuck little
web
spider
stuff.
Peepers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, huh? What's that? It just felt completely detached from what the rest of the experience was supposed to be.
A small touch that I thought was great was the J. Jonah Jameson.
Yeah, those are
radio
so
channel.
Funny.
Like there was one point where it was like, press this button if you want to turn off the radio. I'm like, heck no, I want to hear what he has to say.
Right.
It's basically like Alex Jones of the Spider-Man universe.
He's just
like ranting about Spider-Man ravaging.
Let's be clear. Spider-Man is the reason that the Scorpion is running around in the first place. And it's just like all these people calling in and be like, I don't know, Jameson. Like, I think you're being too hard on Spider-Man. He's like, you're a simpleton and an idiot. It's just like,
and the funny part is like you're like I'm listening to it, but at the same time like Peter as Spider-Man is listening to him rant about how bad Spider-Man is while he's like fighting crime and like, beating people
doing
up.
all these things.
So I thought that was a nice little touch.
Yeah, that's hilarious. So no, I forgot about those, but those were fun. Were there any specific side collectathon things that you enjoyed the most?
So there was the challenge ones.
The Taskmaster?
I didn't like. I hated the ones where you had to do like jump through the hoops, sort of.
Those sucked.
Stuff. I was like, this is dumb. Like, what?
That was hard.
So I like at a certain point, I just gave up and like I would just get the drone without going through any of the hoops to get like one token or something. I actually enjoyed the stealth ones where you had to like take out all the bad guys without getting noticed.
Oh yeah,
because it was like it was a small little thing. Because normally I don't like stealth, but those felt like a fun challenge.
Yeah, and
the nature of Spider-Man was kind of like you could do it really quickly if you kind of like surveyed the area. Then you could just be like boom, 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 and like do it very quickly if you did it right. So that was kind of fun, challenging myself to like try and do it. I wouldn't say the backpacks were fun. I liked the Black Cat missions. That was kind of fun, taking the pictures of those little statues, and then at the end you get that black midnight suit or whatever.
Yep.
So that was kind of a nice little touch. I didn't play any of the DLC, so I don't know.
I haven't either.
What happens there? But.
Yeah. I kind of wish that they would have attached more of the side things to getting suits. Like they give you the tokens, but I think that was one of my favorite parts about the Black Cat one was when you do it, you get a suit out of it, which I feel like is always the most rewarding of like, oh, this actually...
Yeah, because most of the suits like, were literally just...
Oh, this one's unlocked now. Kind of thing.
Yeah, like after I finished a main story mission, I would look and I'd have another suit. And like, so I got used to just looking after missions and being like, oh, there's the next suit.
Yeah.
But I think it would have been cool, like, certain backpacks have a suit in it, or certain research tasks give you like this certain power up for a certain suit or something, and like tying it more to like the collectathon. But
definitely, yeah.
What were your favorite suits? I'm curious.
Hands down, the Spider-Man 2099 ones. Because there were two of them, I believe. There was the blue, like and then it's I think one from one of the other spin-off Spider-Mans. Like I think it's one of the other characters in the show. I used I think I used the Iron Spider a good amount. That one was in there. I thought that was pretty cool. I really like what they did with the games version of the suit. I thought that was like a cool take on it. Like it's got this athletic feel to it, and it feels very different than the other suits. And I kind of
it's like sporty kind of.
Yeah, it's got this sporty feel to it, and I thought that was really cool because I feel like the majority of the time with superhero costumes that we're seeing it very different in the updated Marvel stuff where it's a little more modern, and I think they're kind of designing them to be aesthetically pleasing, but there's always that like morph suit vibe from like the very early days, and I think those just looked like really corny, and I liked how this had like a flair to it. And I think I want to say, besides the water gate thing where everyone's like they took out water and they like downgraded and stuff, like one of the other things was like white spider, what, like this is dumb. Spider's a white spider. Yeah, but
I liked that suit.
Yeah,
it was honestly I probably used that suit like 75% of the game.
Nice,
because in my mind I was like, if they created the suit for me to use, then I might as well just
I'm gonna use it. Yeah,
but I also used the animated one.
Oh,
which was
that
super
was cool.
fun, but also really jarring.
Yeah, it was very
it was pretty funny because I was wearing that suit in the final cutscenes.
Yeah,
so like he walks in and Aunt May's like dying. Yeah, but it's like the animated spider. So, or like he sits down next to Mary Jane as Spider-Man, and it's like this heartfelt moment. He's like the animated spider. So some of those moments were actually pretty funny. Otherwise, I liked the standard one.
Yeah.
And then I think I used the Raimi one for a little while. And I basically stuck to like the movie ones or like the classic Spider-Man ones.
Nice.
I tried using the 2099 one for a while because I thought it looked cool, but I didn't. For some reason, it was jarring to me, even though the animated one was jarring. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
it was fun. I liked
that they had so many different suits. So like people who like different type of aesthetics could like do their thing and kind of be the Spider-Man they want to be.
Definitely.
And stuff. So
yeah, I think that was probably, if I had to say one thing about the game that was my most favorite, is I think it was the multitude of suits, and that you actually get to see that suit in the cutscene. Or I liked when all the loading screens, if you switched it,
and you could see him like doing the poses. Yep.
Yeah, I thought that was a nice.
Yep.
Very small but a nice touch. So cool.
Yeah.
We can kind of wrap up. We're kind of hitting the hour mark, and
cool.
I don't know that we have too much to dive into. If you had to say, and especially as Endgame is coming up, and there seems to be more quality derivative superhero content coming out with like the Into the Spider-Verse movie, this Spider-Man game, a lot of the Marvel films, Shazam was really good. What superhero or comic character, doesn't have to be a superhero, would you like to see a video game as? And what kind of would be the style or gameplay aesthetic that you would go for?
Man. So this is going to sound dumb because it
is.
Maybe. I think Superman, but
I could see that.
So somebody had this interesting idea on Reddit I saw, and it was like, because you'd have to figure out some way of stunting him, because like otherwise what's your progression in the game? Because if you're Superman, you're just stronger than everything, basically.
Right.
So like somebody had the idea where like at the beginning of the game, somehow Lex Luthor turns the sun red. And like I think that happens in the comics at some point. Like Lex Luthor figures out how to turn the sun red. And so like as the game progresses, the sun, there's like a meter, and the sun like slowly becomes yellow again as you play through the game, and you kind of like slowly get powers as like time moves on. I think something like that could be interesting, because I've always wanted a Superman game, just because I'd be interested to see what the execution would be like. I think it'd be hard to implement though.
Yeah.
Otherwise, an Iron Man game.
I was
like a
say,
good version
that's
of
probably
Anthem.
Up there. Yep. Yeah. Well, and that's the crazy thing is like I feel like if Anthem would have been like an Iron Man game or something, it could have been really, really cool.
Did you see there's a VR one?
Yeah.
Iron Man VR.
Yeah,
so
that look kind of cool.
Maybe that's a little hint that we're going to be getting more.
Maybe. And I mean, especially if his character's not as crucial going forward in the Marvel universe, I could see them kind of taking a sidestep.
Maybe
they had a game
sell the
back
video
in the
game
early
rights to
2000s,
Insomniac.
yeah. Dude,
if Insomniac just starts doing a Marvel video game universe, like I'm all for it.
Honestly, dude, like I feel like the majority of the Marvel heroes could have really cool games. Because
I think Hulk could be fun.
Hulk could be fun.
There was a Hulk game that me and my brother loved back in the day.
Well, and that's the thing is, there's some of them that it's like, dude, this could be dope. This is the one that I would want, especially after the Netflix cancellation. But I would want a third-person shooter Punisher game,
dude.
That
me and my brother
like,
loved the PS2 one back in the day.
So I think that one's a little more like has kind of that GTA feel of like the. But I would want a hardcore like Punisher style third person shooter. That would be unreal. Like just almost like as if they gave like Crackdown minus the superpowers and stuff and kind of some of the chaos and like put that in Frank Castle and just kind of did, one of the more like crazy comic book style,
dude, I'd take that
storylines.
That'd be sweet.
Like if they did like Welcome Home Frank and like just did that whole storyline where he's like fighting the mob and then you just get to be Frank Castle, and dude, I would kill for that.
That'd be fun.
That would be tight.
I feel like pretty much all of them would be fun if I think like it would get very trite if they just kept doing the same game. Like it's an open world collectathon game where you're this hero now, and
absolutely
the only thing different is you're this hero rather than that hero, and I think it would get boring after a while. But yeah, I think if they could figure out different ways of making them interesting.
Yep, 100%.
Cool.
Absolutely. Well, cool. Any other last or closing comments before we sign out?
I don't think so. I would highly recommend you play Spider-Man.
Yes.
If you've got a PS4.
Yes.
And I think it's worth buying a PS4 to play. Plus, there's like 20 other exclusives that you could play as well.
Absolutely.
So you can't go wrong.
You can't go wrong. On that note, coming up in the next few weeks. So next week we will be discussing the film Batman Ninja. So that'll be us just kind of talking through the narrative, the art style, all the goodness that we may or may not find in it. It could be trash and we could hate it. It could be amazing.
I'm expecting that it's going to be good, but
yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
We will see. But I'm excited. I think it'll be a fun kind of
different discussion.
Yeah, just a deviation from some of the other stuff that we've been covering. So Batman Ninja, recommend checking that out. And then the last episode of April is Endgame. And I'm not ready.
I'm ready?
Not ready.
I'm not.
I am not ready to rumble, and I'm not ready to say goodbye. But I'm gonna have to say goodbye to some people, and I don't know
cry
who.
Some tears.
And I'm gonna shed some tears.
Yep.
And it's gonna be an interesting. That's gonna be an interesting discussion. So that will be probably the most positive vibes episode that we will ever
hopefully
create. I'm pretty sure.
It'd be an interesting turn of events if it wasn't.
Yeah, it's just absolute garbage.
Like, wow, dude, that movie was actually trash.
That was unbelievably bad. I don't think so. I don't think it's possible at this point.
I'm excited for it.
But yeah, super excited. On that note, if you would like to share this show with any of your friends or family or relatives or coworkers or random people on the bus or, I don't know, on your socials or in carrier pigeons or what have you, be sure to send them to iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, or Spotify. That is where we keep all of this goodness. And if you'd like to follow us on social media, we are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Pop Culture Punks. Phil and I individually are on Twitter at I am Phil Sorensen and at JK and Pop Culture. You can also shoot us any ideas, messages, hate mail, what have you, at popculturepunks@gmail.com. We're still waiting on hate mail because once we get it, we know we've made it. Yep. But until then, we'll just wait with bated breath. So yeah, please do not shy away from sending any ideas for episodes or chiming in on things that we previously talked about. We'd love to hear from you. This is meant to be kind of a conversation, and we'd love to do more like callback episodes, but I think we just haven't had the outreach, so we haven't had the opportunity to. But if that were to happen, we would be super stoked to. Mm-hmm. Last but not least, we have some merch and designs and stuff that you can purchase on Redbubble and Threadless. We get like $1 kickback from anything you buy, which we appreciate a lot and helps support the show and just kind of show us some love. Show that you're part of the Pop Culture Punks. What's another P word for people? Pop Culture Punks people.
Pop Culture Punks peoples.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So thanks for tuning in. Next week will be Batman Ninja. The following week, Endgame. And then we will be sharing in that last week what will be coming in May. And it's going to be a fun month. It's going to be pretty loaded. Mm-hmm. Until then, we will catch you on the next one. And we will... dude, I'm tired. I think I have jet lag.
Yeah, I'm getting tired too.
Oh, boy.
Bid the folks a Confawabunga.